everyone, I'm Nico from Licks of the Beast, and in this video I'm going to be offering a rebuttal to 5 criticisms some people have of Iron Maiden's new album, Senjutsu. Since the album was released, I've done a few song breakdowns, I've talked about my overall first impressions, and I've covered a few solos. And while it seems that most of you really like the album, I have seen quite a few comments from those who can't get past certain things or are having a hard time understanding some of the band's musical choices. So, if you're among those who have one or more of the following objections with Senjutsu, or if hearing others express them made you wonder about these things, I made this video with you in mind, hoping to provide a different outlook from a songwriter's perspective. Before I get started, I want to say that I'm not trying to defend the band from overly harsh critics or suggest that every decision they make is the best one. Making an album as a band is a very complex undertaking, and when you have 6 musicians with the kind of experience that these guys have, including 4 very prolific songwriters with their own preferences and writing styles, you're gonna have ideas clashing, and ultimately compromises will have to be made. Sometimes, at the time of writing or recording, you make certain choices that seem right at the time, but then later on you might change your mind, and that's just an inevitable reality. So you have to take that into account and realize that a recorded version of a song is not necessarily the artist's definitive vision for that piece, but only what they thought was best at the time, with all of the variables that can be an influence both in and out of the studio. Alright, so having said all that, let's get to it. Here is my rebuttal to 5 common criticisms of Iron Maiden's new album, Senjutsu. Criticism number 1, the songs are too long. So when I come across this kind of comment, my first thought is always, too long by which standard? To be a collection of radio-friendly singles or straight-ahead, fast, up-tempo rock songs, then yes, the songs are way too long, too wordy, too many parts, and too many guitar solos. But for an album with a cinematic feel with songs that tell stories, I think the songs are just the right length. There are a lot of parts that are there to create atmosphere, build up a mood, or set the scene for the story in question. And if they were to cut them short, you would feel like something was missing. Take The Parchment, for example. Now let's say you cut the beginning in half, so you make each of these parts just once instead of doubling down and repeating them. Now, when you go into this riff, you're gonna have to play it just once, or at most twice. Otherwise, it's gonna make that short, clean intro pointless. You also can't play this next part here, because then it'll sound like you're just stacking parts together haphazardly. So now you're going straight into the verse, but with this kind of structure, you can't start doing long verses without a chorus, because the song won't make any sense that way. People won't know what the song is supposed to be. So if you're starting a song with an epic cinematic vibe, you have to commit to that. Or if you're starting from these long verses, it's the same thing. You have to commit to the long format, which means you have to make the instrumental parts a little more drawn out. Or you end up with a song like The Apparition, which to this day many still don't know what that song is supposed to be. So either you're writing a straight-ahead rocker or a long-form storyteller type of song. But trying to do something in between, the results won't be awesome. And also, some of these longer, drawn-out parts have a strong hypnotic quality to them, which is exactly what they're designed to do. Kind of lull you into the song so that you can sit there for a while and soak it all in. It's actually a wonderful thing. And don't forget that there are also some shorter and more direct songs on the album like Stratego, Days of Future Past, Darkest Hour, and The Writing on the Wall. Criticism number 2. There aren't enough guitar harmonies. As a guitar player, I love dual and even triple guitar harmonies, so I can't say that I wouldn't enjoy an album with a lot more of those. However, you can't put guitar harmonies in a song just because it's a cool thing to do. It just doesn't work that way. A harmony is an embellishment that could make some melodies really pop. Think of The Trooper, Children of the Damned, Aces High, Caught Somewhere in Time. But in other cases, it can make things sound cluttered and messy. For example, I often hear people wonder why Iron Maiden started harmonizing in octaves more often. And it's simply because of the kind of melody lines that they're writing. I talked about this a little bit in the video I did about the riffs of Power Slave, where I explained why some of the harmonized lines in Rime of the Ancient Mariner were in octaves instead of thirds. It just makes things sound bigger and more open sometimes. When I listen to this album, there is not one point where I think, oh man, they really should have put in a 3-part guitar harmony there. These songs just don't call for it. Now, just for the fun of it, let's take a few parts from the album and play them with a typical Maiden-style harmony in thirds, just to see how it sounds. That harmony turned a powerful breakdown riff into some weird video game music from 1987. Okay, that one actually sounded pretty cool. The only problem there is that that line only happens briefly as a variation of the main line. And to keep it consistent with the song, you'd have to then harmonize the main part too, and that would sound like this. Okay, that is actually pretty cool too, because it's got a bit of a Somewhere in Time kind of vibe. But I tried playing that with the song for a bit, and before long, it started to feel just way too busy. So, I listened back to this one a few times, and at first I thought it sounded really messy. Then I thought, it was kind of cool. And now I think it's just overwhelming and unnecessarily busy. Criticism number 3, they plagiarized a bunch of their own work. I love this one because you can't plagiarize yourself. Plagiarism means to copy someone else's work, so that doesn't really hold up. But I guess what is really meant here is recycling their own material. But putting semantics aside, I do understand what people mean. And there are definitely parts on the album that are reminiscent of their previous work. But the thing is that it's perfectly normal for an artist to use similar patterns, phrases, licks, rhythms, and melodies in their various works. The chorus of Stratego is reminiscent of Don't Look to the Eyes of a Stranger. Parts of The Time Machine are reminiscent of The Talisman and Edge of Darkness. The chorus of Lost in a Lost World is a bit similar to The Wicker Man. And Dave's solo in Darkest Hour has the same lick as he uses in Coming Home, and so on. Albert King played this lick in almost every single one of his solos. Billy Gibbons played this one here more times than I can remember, and Metallica wrote 3 variations of the song Fade to Black on 3 consecutive albums, each time as the last song on side A, including almost identical intros. But that's actually a really cool thing to do. The Number of the Beast, Heaven Can Wait, The Clairvoyant, and Man on the Edge all feature the same, right, the When the Saints Go Marching In pattern in D major. But nobody ever objects to that for some reason. Criticism number 4, the songs are repetitive. I think this is the kind of thing that happens when one gives a first listen to an album that is as intense and loaded as Senjutsu, and then tries to take it all in at once, and expects to connect with it the way they did with an album they might already be very familiar with, like Power Slave or whatever. They get overwhelmed, and it ends up all being processed as one big jumbled mess. Only certain parts stick to your mind, and thus the sensation of everything being repetitive. The truth is that this album features some of their more interesting arrangements. Songs like Senjutsu, The Time Machine, The Parchment, and Hell on Earth feature some pretty unique arrangements that are not at all predictable or repetitive. And again, Maiden have always used repetition as a way to reinforce a musical section in their songs. For example, in 2 Minutes to Midnight, they play the very simple main riff, many times over 6 minutes, as it also doubles as the verse riff. In Wasted Years, they play the main motif, four times as an intro, 8 times as an interlude before the solo, and again 4 times as the outro. That's a lot of repetition for a 5-minute single. To Tame a Land has a very long interlude that is just 2 chords repeating. And a long outro that is the same motif over and over. "22 Acacia Avenue," most of the song is based on the simple main riff. Criticism number 5. This one's a bit of a bonus, but it's that Dave played a lazy solo on the Writing on the Wall. The reason for this one is that while Adrian did a phenomenal, long and elaborate solo, Dave played something that isn't quite as melodic and doesn't have as much movement. But that's a bit like saying the verse isn't as catchy as the chorus, because the 2 solos in that song serve 2 entirely different purposes. Adrian's solo is meant to be this big melodic thing, a song within a song, if you will. Dave's comes at a point in the song where it's been one catchy riff and melody after another, and what is needed most right there is a breakdown of some sort. Enter Dave Murray with his short Hendrixy licks. Just to give the listener a chance to groove a little bit before the next melodic interlude that leads to Adrian's magnificent solo. Knowing what is the right thing to play at any given time is a very important lesson that all guitarists should learn. That's it for this video. Again, I want to reiterate that my intention here wasn't to defend Maiden. They're one of the biggest rock bands in the world. They can take care of themselves. Nor was it to justify why I like the album so much. I made this video to give you a different point of view on some of those criticisms and explain what I believe to be the reasons for some of those things from a songwriter's perspective. And I really hope that it was interesting and entertaining. Please leave your questions and comments down below, and as always, just a reminder to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. The channel is growing slow and steady, and those of you who are doing those things are helping in a big way. Thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.